what we need to remind ourselves is that, Zimbabwe's situation is not an accident. Having Mnangagwa in power is not an accident. These are things that were planned, that were, perfected over the last 45 years of our existence as a so-called independent country. You listen to Mnangagwa talk in interviews where he tries to sort of give himself credit, like Donald Trump, for a lot of things that happened in Zimbabwe. I participated in this, I did that. You can tell the men, like all of the ZANU-PF people, have always been preparing Zimbabwe for the situation that we are in. They've always been carving Zimbabwe to be where we are. And like I said, not an accident, because, before independence, these guys, the so-called liberators, were friends with countries that have known dictatorship and autocracy for most of their existence. You think of China, who were our backers during the liberation struggle. You think of Russia. If you think of Russia, they are also so-called very educated people. But I will surprise many here by telling you that out of Russia's existence, let's say, for example, assuming they have been in existence for 500 or 400 years or 470 years, they've only known, sort of democratic rule for only about 8 or 15 years of that existence. And the rest has been dictatorship. That is the risk that we run in Zimbabwe. That what we think we've experienced so far is enough may actually go on and on and on and on for years, like the Russian situation, because these guys take model of the Russian system. They take model of the Belarusian system. They take model of the Cuban system. They take model of the Chinese system, systems that have oppressed their people for years. What has not happened in our system is perhaps a change of hands regularly, where leaders come and go. In most of these systems I've mentioned, most of the leaders come and go. It's only in the times of Vladimir Putin that you have had perhaps a much more prolonged rule of a dictator. That has led to those countries to a little bit of development, a little bit of, if you look at the Chinese system, their leaders have changed hands for quite some time. And because of that, there has been some development in China. There has been, so Isusu as Zimbabwe, we've been stuck with just one leader since independence up to 2017. And that leader, together with his lieutenant, who is actually in power now, led to the rot that we are experiencing today. We are living the same situation repeatedly. Zimbabwe was carved for a one-party state by ZANU-PF. They've always said it openly. They have said it repeatedly, like Museveni, who told his people once he came into power that if you think there's going to be an alternative system, forget about it. And look what he's doing. Messing in front of the Ugandans. And the people just continue as if life is normal. This is what we have in Zimbabwe. So our problem in Zimbabwe is that for us as a people, we have allowed ourselves, like all these other countries where there's dictatorship, to be groomed for docility. And because we've allowed ourselves to be groomed for docility, we think these guys are invincible. We have come to think that these guys cannot be removed from power. We have been trained since the colonial times to fear This is why you hear ZANU-PF war liberators, the so-called ZANU-PF war liberators, boast in front of us and say, we brought this to you. It's because during the liberation struggle, it was the comrades who were thought to have been fighting, only the comrades who were thought to have been fighting, and not us, the generality of Zimbabweans. We were, tossed left, right, and center by both sides of the armies, the Rhodesian Front and the Zanga and the Zipra forces. And that led to a situation whereby we always expect that someone must come and liberate us, because it was implanted in our heads that someone needs to liberate us. But the Zimbabwean situation requires that Zimbabweans themselves, the ordinary people, need to know that we are our own liberators. If Zimbabwe is going to be free, it is going to be liberated by us, by our refusal to continue to be under this rule. In countries where people have not done that and have not risen against autocracy, they continue to be under autocracy. I've given you the example of Russia, where people have been under autocracy for the last 400 or so years. They have not known anything else apart from a few years when they experience a bit of that. So we risk that as a people if we do not rise as a people. And how we're going to get to that is going to be a long story. Because to get to a point where you actually tell a Zimbabwean that it's you who needs to do that is very hard, because people still think it's Chamisa who needs to do that. You have to use your senior's words, Chamatamasi, to do that. Leaders come and go. They will come and go. But the spirit of freedom needs to stay in people. It has to be in people. If you look at the example of European countries, you will know that a lot of what they enjoy today came because they led revolutions. They had revolutions that led to where they are. And their people tasted power and know that every time their government messes up, they are in the streets. Look at what happens in America. They experience a dictatorship. They are experiencing a dictatorship now. But people have not stopped fighting the system. They continue to go on the streets. They continue to do all kinds of things to make sure they destabilize the system. And that they don't tolerate this nonsense.